Hello, and welcome back to the New York State Department of Health Clinical Education Initiative's Building Blocks for Trans and Gender Diverse Care series. My name is Kai, my pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm a CEI clinical educator.
And I'm Erica Bostic. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm an adolescent medicine physician and faculty for the CEI Sexual Health Center of Excellence.
In this video, we're going to talk about what life is like for transgender folks in today's world. I'll warn you right now, this particular video is going to be a bit heavy because transgender folks are still dealing with a lot of discrimination. But I'm going to ask you to do me a favor and make sure you also stay tuned for the next video because there's a whole lot of joy and art and love to celebrate in our community. And we're going to talk about that too.
This is a series for healthcare professionals. Why do healthcare professionals need to know about caring for transgender individuals? Well, for one, because they are people who deserve health care just like everyone else. But more specifically, transgender people often seek out health care for the same reason that many others do, because they are in pain. Unlike a broken bone or a headache, the pain transgender and other gender diverse people frequently come to me with is something we refer to as gender dysphoria. It's the pain that comes from being told that who you are is different from who you know yourself to be. In short, gender dysphoria is feeling a mismatch between the body one is born with and who one identifies as for a period of longer than 6 months, associated with distress or risk of distress.
Gender dysphoria can feel different to everyone, but it generally falls into one of two broad categories: social dysphoria and body dysphoria. So social dysphoria, like the name implies, is an uncomfortable feeling associated with how the world responds to you based on your gender. So for example, if I were to walk into a store and someone asked me if they could help me by saying, "Ma'am, is there anything I can do to help?" I would feel a lot of social dysphoria. I'd feel incredibly uncomfortable, and I would feel small and powerless because despite all of my best efforts and despite who I know myself to be, the world is seeing me as and treating me as a woman, which just doesn't align with who I am. That's a little different from body dysphoria, which is also incredibly painful. Body dysphoria is when there's something about your body that just does not match who you know yourself to be. So for example, if a trans woman looks at a mirror and sees her penis and feels this incredible sense of discomfort because she doesn't feel like that belongs on her body, she might describe herself as experiencing body dysphoria.
We need to take gender dysphoria very seriously. It can be incredibly painful and can have significant negative outcomes that appear in all aspects of a person's life.
Now, we don't have a ton of data about the trans community, but the data we do have agree on a few things. And most of them involve the fact that gender dysphoria and the way that society stigmatizes trans people can lead to some serious outcomes. So one study that we have that gives us some pretty good information about the United States' trans population is the 2015 Transgender Discrimination Survey. And in that survey, we learned that 10% of trans people who were out to their immediate family had experienced physical violence at the hands of their family members. We also learned that 19% of folks who grew up in a church or spiritual community left because they were rejected by that spiritual community. That 2015 National Transgender Discrimination Survey also told us that 40% of transgender and non-binary people have attempted suicide in their life at least once. Also, that transgender and non-binary people are living with HIV at a rate that is 5 times that for cisgender counterparts. We learned that trans and non-binary people use non-prescribed medication at a rate that's nearly 4 times that for cisgender people. And we learned that 82% of transgender and non-binary people seriously contemplated suicide at some point in their life.
I am an adolescent medicine doc, and I witness firsthand how significantly gender dysphoria can impact gender diverse youth and their families on a day-to-day basis. Data from the Human Rights Campaign 2018 LGBTQ Youth Report, which surveyed over 12,000 youth, showed 50% of trans and gender-expansive youth said that they can never use a school restroom that align with their gender identity. Only 5% say that all of their teachers and school staff are supportive of their LGBTQ identity. 85% of LGBTQ youth rate their average stress level as a 5 or higher on a 1 to 10 scale.
Now let's be 100% clear about one thing. Being transgender or gender diverse is not a mental illness. Dealing with society's negative feelings towards transgender and gender diverse people often leads to negative mental health outcomes, including gender dysphoria, depression, anxiety, and in too many cases, suicidality.
But it doesn't have to be that way. Several studies have shown that one of the most protective factors for gender diverse youth is family acceptance and affirmation.
And when trans and gender diverse people get the medical care they need to feel at home in their bodies, mental health improves as well.
There's a theory that we can use to put all of this together. It's called the minority stress model. Minority stress is the extraneous stress that marginalized people experience because of their marginalization, above and beyond the everyday stresses of all people. So minority stress works like this. Being a gender or sexual minority leads to both internal and external stigma. Internal stigma, like gender dysphoria, hiding one's identity, all comes with stress. That is compounded by external stigma, prejudice, discrimination, lots of the statistics that we just reviewed. Those two things lead to minority stress. And as that stress builds, that can lead to anxiety, depression, PTSD, and that leads to things like substance use, suicide, victimization. The good news is, as healthcare providers, we can do something to break the cycle. We can ask the questions, identify those folks early, and connect them with resources and support. That allows them to potentially live safely in their authentic gender identity and improve their quality of life. With that comes improved health outcomes, and really lots of outcomes: mental health, physical health, social, financial, and educational.
As we've discussed, minority stress can take a lot of shapes and forms. Some of it is really personal. Some of it happens to us in interactions throughout our everyday lives. Some of it exists in the systems all around us. The systemic forms of minority stress can be just as painful and deadly as the others. A lot of these policies have been variably enforced or rewritten over the years. By the time you watch this video, there might be a whole new set of legal challenges or policies to add to the list. All of this volatility, all of these people weighing in on what trans people can or cannot do, that has consequences too.
Why go through all of this terrible stuff? It's hard to watch, hard to stomach, emotionally exhausting, and hard to keep track of. Well, part of the strategy is emotional and cognitive overload. It's up to us to overcome that so we know what's going on and demand change. Also, as healthcare professionals, we need to know the stressors that impact our patients so that we can support their health.
Now, let's take a deep breath, regroup, and take a minute to write down one thing that we all commit to doing to make this better. Remember, minority stress can have a big toll, but we can also make a big impact by interrupting the minority stress cycle. And we don't have to stay stuck in the stress, because our community, the trans community, is vibrant and joyful and creative and full of love. In our next video, we're going to celebrate what it means to be transgender and proud. Stay tuned.